of our showcase attendees, so I think we're down to one today. But thank you all for making the time. Hopefully we have our presenter on. But I just want to take the opportunity to introduce you again to some of the execs who are on to listen to some of the great work that you're doing across the organisation. So for the execs who are on, do you just want to say hello?
Hello, I'm Jess, I'm the Chief Operating Officer.
Hi, Vincent, Chief Medical Officer.
Hi, I'm Kate, I'm Chief People Officer.
Thanks, everyone. So have we got James on now?
Yes, we have.
Great.
I don't know what insight I'm giving you from Australia though, Natalie, and that's not the title I'm expecting.
I was going to say, I think that's probably insights from Australia when our chair went to Australia. That was the last meeting, but do feel free to tell us anything about Australia that you'd like to do during your presentation, James. So we're going to hand over to you. You've got a selection of staff across the organisation interested in hearing about your QI project. So over to you.
Great, thanks all. Those that don't know me, I'm James. I'm one of the medical directors. I work in Care Group 4, which is unplanned care, and I work on the side of unplanned care called same-day emergency care. So that basically means that I oversee all of the crisis and emergency services within the organisation. So it's nice to meet you. And I'm sorry that you're getting me today. It would have been much more interesting for you to have one of our trainees, Serene Loganathan, who is also doing a leadership fellowship scheme with the Royal College of Psychiatrists, and I'm really presenting on her behalf. It would have been nice for her to have the opportunity to talk to you all, but she has gone on maternity leave, I believe, or she may be on annual leave just before maternity leave, so congratulations to her. But anyway, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to present her work, which I supported her with, and this is about improving ethnicity recording on Rio. I suppose just before we launch into the project, I just wanted to take a moment to talk about why this project was important. It's something that Serene really chose as the focus of her year's work. So just to let you know that what happens with our higher trainee doctors, over the last few years, we have supported them, and with thanks to Vincent for approving the funding, to have 2 of our higher trainees to be put through the leadership scheme with the Royal College of Psychiatrists, which means that they essentially have some teaching through the Royal College throughout the course of a year. They get a mentor internally, they learn about leadership management, and they also have a project which they follow through for the year as well. The reason that Serene chose this project with my support was because essentially we as an organisation have an agenda to reduce the numbers of detentions in 136 detentions in black men specifically is the target we have as an organisation. And that's a very difficult thing to address. As we all know, the numbers of black men being detained under any section of the Mental Health Act is for multiple reasons. But when we started looking into that data and thinking about, well, what can we do? What we realized is that actually our ethnicity recording across the organization is incredibly poor, full stop. So in terms of QI methodology, of course, what we wanted to do is think about narrowing down the target of what we're wanting to do. So really what this project started out with was thinking about, okay, where's the patient-focused agenda here? It's about reducing the numbers of detentions in black men. Obviously, we can all support that we would all want that. But actually, what we found through our fact finding is that actually our ethnicity recording overall is pretty poor. So we don't even really know how many people we are detaining of different ethnicities in different parts of the organization. Some areas we document it incredibly well. Other areas it's really done quite poorly. So in terms of this QI project, essentially what we looked at is that our ethnicity recording is around 50% overall, looking at our services where people are detained under Section 136. So that is our health-based place of safety, which is at the Highgate site. So if our ethnicity recording in that area is only 50%, then it's obviously very difficult to understand and extrapolate that information and work out how we're going to reduce detentions in any specific demographic. So the smart aim for this QI project, supported by CFI for the QI team, was to reduce the percentage of referrals with ethnicity not recorded accurately by 10% by March 2024. So if we go on to the next slide, I'm not sure who's sharing. Is it Sean? Thank you. So first of all, we used Pareto charts to really work out the scale of the problem. So as I'm sure other QI people in the room could explain better than I can, but in terms of the Pareto methodology, it's understanding that 60% of your problem lies within one small area. Is that, Alison, do you want to correct me on how to explain a Pareto chart? But it's actually understanding where the majority of your problem lies. So what we can see here is if we look at where ethnicity is not being recorded and we look on our RIO categories, we can see that most people are clicking in a section saying any other group, not applicable or not known. So what we see is if we just look at those three areas on RIO where you can click when you're opening a referral, what the ethnicity of the person is, with those three categories, we're covering off more than 60% of the problem. So if we can address that bit of the problem in RIO, then we might be able to improve our data recording overall. Is that a okay explanation, Alison? Do you want to improve on that?
No, you're fine, James. So it's looking at the bulk of where the majority of the problem is. So as you say, in fact, what we've got there is not known, NA or any other group. So we look at the 80-20 rule. So it's the 80%, as you can see from the red line there.
Okay. So essentially what we discovered is that we don't make it easy for our staff to record ethnicity for a start, and there are multiple categories that we could put, and there are multiple opportunities for people not to record an ethnicity as well, and there is a complexity around that which we might have time to talk about once I get through the slides as well. Next slide. Okay, so in terms of looking at our primary drivers and our change ideas, so we want to reduce the percentage of referrals with ethnicity not recorded. So what we found out is that most people, you're opening a referral, people will click on the easiest option that they don't know. Maybe they're taking a telephone referral, they don't have the person in front of them, they don't know how the person would describe their ethnicity. And there's multiple options for people not to include an ethnicity in RIO. So what Serene did with CFI was spent quite a lot of time with the teams at the health-based place of safety, looking at understanding how people take referrals, why we need the information. And what was interesting with this is what we found through that digging is that people actually felt that it was quite a sensitive thing to be asking. So some people didn't feel comfortable to say, well, how would you describe your ethnicity? What button should I press? You know, is it black, white, other? How many different degrees of ethnicity describing should we have? So what we unpicked with this QI project was that really we opened up a massive can of worms here about people not feeling confident to ask the question, people feeling that they weren't quite sure if they might offend people by asking about their ethnicity, that they would rather record unknown or not asked than put the wrong thing down. So there was an awful lot of staff awareness and understanding and training that need to go on. So I'm not going to run through absolutely everything here, but it uncovered quite a big piece of work, in fact. So initially we had hoped with this project that we were going to be able to expand it from the health-based place of safety to our mental health crisis assessment centre, our mental health A&E, which is just across the car park at the Highgate site as well. But actually we stuck more or less just with the place of safety initially because there was so much work to be done there. So having to put posters up, remind people why we're doing this. And I think the interesting thing for me, particularly in sort of supporting and mentoring, is this: you just had to constantly take people back to the patient-related outcome. Because obviously with QI, we always have to, there always should be a patient-related target, right? We should be doing something in the interest of patient improvement. And I think with this particular project, people initially struggled to work out why it was patient related. Why does it matter if I click the right ethnicity or not? Why am I having to ask the questions or ask someone on the phone who's delivering a referral? Maybe in this situation, it's a police officer on the street with someone in quite a heightened situation, and they just want to get the person to the place for safety. But actually you're asking them, well, how would the person describe their ethnicity? And people would just default clicking not applicable because it's just easier and quicker. But actually the ongoing impact of clicking that means that ethnicity is documented as recorded, but actually doesn't give us any useful information. So in the heat of the moment, it's useful because you just accept the referral. But actually, in terms of understanding our national data, our local data, how we improve services, it was really problematic. So lots of work done. Next slide. Okay, so what did we see and what did we achieve? So what we're looking at on the left-hand side was our MCAS data, so the Mental Health Crisis Assessment Service, where we tried to get this get this started as well. On the right-hand side, you'll see our place of safety data. So you can see that there was change. So what we're looking at, remember, we're looking at, we want the numbers to go lower because you want fewer people not identified as having an ethnicity. So you want a positive ethnicity recording, ultimately. So in the MCAS data, you can see the data went down from 16 to 13%. Remember, we're trying to get to 10%. And the place of safety, we had a 1% reduction. So 3% reduction at MCAS, 1% reduction at the place of safety from 7% to 6%. So the place of safety doing pretty well, really. Next slide. What are we looking at here? So again, so place of safety is now switched. So place of safety is now on the left-hand side, MCAS is on the right. I think what this shows, so if you just look at the place of safety data on the left-hand side, so the categories of any other group, not applicable, not known, not stated. So interestingly, for really quite a complex project with multiple sort of difficult conversations being had, the quick wins were actually just removing buttons from Rio. So just simplifying the process for the people at the front line. So we removed the category of any other group, removed the category of not applicable, and then just left it with a not known and not stated or another. So it doesn't solve the problem entirely, but it reduces the options that people have to click. Next slide. Okay, so that's essentially the data for the project. There was some improvement shown, but I can't honestly, hand on heart, say that we have delivered the aims that we wanted to achieve. I think for me, what was really interesting was, having supported this project over more than a year now, was just how difficult it is to get data changed and to get Rio changed. And I think and also the sustainability of that. So with Serene working on it full time up until last summer, and now she's back in her full-time job, and now she's gone on maternity leave, just the impact of, you need someone on the ground constantly reminding and getting people along, getting people to do the correct thing. So actually the sustainability of a project like this was based on the person on the ground really being there, not every day, but just to remind people constantly. And I think the interesting bit of the project where we haven't actually got to yet is being confident enough in our data to actually then be able to extrapolate. So if we are comfortable and confident in our data recording for ethnicity, now the interesting bit starts, because now we can actually look at, okay, well, the national data says that Black men are disproportionately represented within the detained population. What does our local data tell us? We can assume, being in a central London locations, that it probably does echo the national data. But until we really have confidence in that data, we then can't reach out to our stakeholders, our police colleagues, to start thinking about, okay, well, how do we actually try to unpick that? And how do we do the work in the community to reduce those detentions? So essentially lots of work still to go. I'm presenting a project that had lots of difficulties and complexities attached to it. So it's definitely not a perfect project, but it did use QI methodologies all the way through. And that's about where I end, probably. I think that's the final. Yeah. So happy to take discussion, questions on, see what I can.
Thank you. Thank you, James. Do you want to take down the slides, Sean, please? And we'll take some questions. Really interesting, because as you say, James, there's learning in this, not perfect, project. There is from the QI methodology, but not necessarily from all the outcomes, but that's where we need to learn as well. And that's all the part of QI as well. So Karen, I'll come to you first.
Thank you, James. I was really interested in this because I know it's a thing in our crisis telephone service that we don't record it as often as we should. So I was really interested, and you came up with the number one answer that we give as well. Oh, it feels sensitive, it feels difficult to ask, and I felt the same as you. So it was nice to hear that different teams are having similar stuff. Well, nice, almost nice, and I'm thinking if they only understood why. So my question is, do you think we could develop a script or something of some of the phrases that would be good to ask people, and maybe some of the explanations of why we ask, like you were saying, the in a disproportionate detentions, etc., and that might help people. When I say we, I obviously it could be anyway, but I was just thinking, what about that? That might help people, mightn't it? And then how should we go about that? That's my thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good idea. I mean, that's the meat of the project, really. That's kind of step 2, which we now need to think about. And I think obviously that will take, more system working to think about, all of us asking ourselves, how would you like that question to be asked? And I think what I felt is that quite often for your service, it may be that you can't answer that question at the time of the telephone referral. But the problem is with Rio, as far as I understand it at the moment, as far as we've got to, is that once that box is ticked as answered, where even if it doesn't give you a useful data point, then it doesn't flash up again. So there needs to be some way that if it is ticked within a crisis service where it may be appropriate not to have that longer conversation, that the flag has to come back up again sort of 24 hours later. Right, okay, now the person isn't in crisis, now they've sat in the HBOS for 14 hours and been assessed, and actually now we can have a good opportunity at actually describing the ethnicity. It's interesting to say that, for example, on our wards, ethnicity is pretty well recorded. Again, you've got good clinical administrators for a start on the wards, and also you've got the patient in front of you for a good period of time where you've got the time to have that conversation. So there's some ideas there as well.
Can I just say that we've got a form now that we fill in when we take up, we've got 3 Rio and data entry forms. So when we do it, it goes in. So maybe from my end, we should look at how that does link and how it does pop up again, because our form should populate the Rio record through our form. So I'll look at those links and see. But yeah, okay, thanks.
Thank you, James. Thank you, Karen. Jess.
Thanks, James. So can I just check the reason for it not being, you sort of skimmed over it, but so I get in acute situations it might be hard to elicit the information, but what are the other factors that are driving people not doing this? Is it just an area that people don't think is important? Was it highlighted as being embarrassing to ask? What is it that's kind of stopping people getting this information out?
I think it's a bit of both of those. People not feeling comfortable, people not understanding why it's important. Obviously, we did quite a lot of work on that throughout the project of getting people on board with why this matters. But then it's more about people having anxieties about cultural sensitivities, about asking people, how would you describe your ethnicity if I had to tick a box on this form and my 3 options are black, white, other? How does that make you feel? Does that feel descriptive of who you are? There was an awful lot of, it went into quite good conversations, but quite in-depth conversations, and I think we probably need to take that back to a different forum, and Serene and Sifi have started some of this work already, to think about how we take it forwards from here.
Thanks, James. Ephraim.
All right, thanks, Alison. James, quite an informative presentation. Thank you for that. My question is regards to when a service user actually does not want to disclose. I don't know whether that has been explored and what that is asked, and ask why they don't want to disclose, not in a, sort of like challenging or demanding manner, But having managed triage services, I did come across quite a number where people would think that if I disclose certain things, maybe services would be withdrawn because maybe I don't qualify or something like that, or people just thinking that they'll be, you know, categorized in a certain place, and people were very not upfront. But I think it's very much, in as much as we need to educate the clinicians to record and make sure that it's important to ask, but I did note quite a large number, or a big number of service users who would prefer not to say, and just tease out those reasons why they didn't want to disclose that information, because rightly it's important.
Yeah, interesting points. I think that's where the conversation needs to go next, really. And then there's that question around, well, how much do we have the right not to disclose if people are coming to our services? That we have to be able to process people's data in a way that serves them and supports them. So what do we tolerate people not disclosing? I mean, people can't not disclose their identity because we have to be able to identify the person, right? And it causes problems when they do. I mean, there's the gender question as well. So there's a lot of complexity within what seems like quite a simple question on the face of it.
Thanks, James. Franca.
Thank you, Alison, and thanks, James, for this research. It's very important for us all to be aware of some of those complexity. And my query is mainly around why would staff feel uncomfortable to ask those questions? I think most of the areas have been addressed already. But again, from my personal experience when working in the crisis team, as Karen was saying, sometimes when you ask the question, you have to present yourself to describe what you're asking. That help the client to identify themselves in the kind of way. Well, again, the point you highlighted around the Rio, this is conversation that we've had for a while now. Rio is really congested. Some of the kind of areas, headings need to be kind of streamlined to allow some of the questions to be asked appropriately. Like Karen was saying, I'm happy to be part of any kind of piloting group to look at formulating the questions to develop training for staff, because it's very important. I did a research on this about 10 years ago, whereby people are categorized and they feel like they were put aside. So there's a area where people feel like they are not giving the service that they require because they identify as certain kind of group. So that needs to be acknowledged when we are asking questions.
Absolutely, thank you.
And Kate.
It's not really a question. It's just I found it really interesting. I popped it in the chat there, particularly around staff. I think you've just said it, Frankie, around staff not feeling able to ask the question. That actually doesn't surprise me. And we have quite a lot of discussions around, from a staffing perspective, around people not being able to ask curious questions. I know this is a form filling situation, but we do have quite a lot of discussions around that. And I think we're talking a lot at the moment, because it's come up really strongly on the staff survey and other pieces of information around psychological safety, and thinking about staff psychological safety and them feeling able to speak up. But it kind of struck me, and it probably already does with you, if our service users don't feel psychologically safe to be able to say what ethnicity there are. And I wondered whether anything had been thought about or done around that, because I think that's really interesting. How do you build up that psychological safety? I think, James, you said in a ward environment it's easier to do, because you've got people who are more trained and skilled in it, and you possibly have more time for that relationship to develop. It was a question, actually. Turned into a question. It wasn't at the beginning.
I mean, I think this conversation is emblematic of the project as a whole, and I think, we haven't. I think we got tied up in the data points and in terms of the Rio technicalities, and there was another issue that we discovered in terms of our data reporting, and our data reporting doesn't always link to in the same way to what we are recording. So there seems to be two different data sets which are being used as well. So it really, for Serene's project, which, as I said, for 18 months, it's really been, the meat of it has really been about the tech of Rio and all of that stuff. And actually this conversation, which is where I wanted to get to, hasn't really started yet. This is kind of phase 2.
Thanks, James. Natalie.
So it'd be good to know we've picked up those technical reporting issues. And I think sometimes we get too wrapped up in that than really getting to the real issue, and maybe, you know, how we put, like you say, what's phase 2 and how quickly can we get to it. But I would say psychological safety and issues around disclosure from our service users is an issue, but probably not. I think we're probably looking at the wrong issue to start with, because that's a significant number of people not being reported, and that's more to do with what we're doing than how patients feel. And I think obviously there have been multitude of issues, but where do we start to focus first?
Thanks, Natalie. Karen?
Thanks. I think it's really interesting that Ephraim and Ferenca were picking up on psychological safety of patients. And I was thinking, we're actually wanting to do this to avoid this. I agree. They do feel that if their ethnicity is out there and it's in one clan that one group that we don't feel is what's the words I need? They feel that they're going to be not looked after because of it. They might be afraid, but we actually want it to make sure we avoid that. So I was just wondering if our opening line needs to be, you know, when we maybe make our guides of how to talk about it, we should say we've noticed there's a disproportionate whatever, and add that in, so we put it as a positive before we get it out there. I don't know, sorry, my words aren't coming to me at the moment, but you know what I mean. I'm trying to say, shall we address it overtly and say we want to avoid this issue in the way we start our questions?
I think that sounds like a good idea, yeah.
Thanks, Karen. Vincent?
I'm with Natalie on this. I mean, as you know, I've been practicing for many, well, decades. It's rare that people object to me asking their ethnicity, and I absolutely do it on every single assessment that I do. So I think the bigger problem is the staff being afraid to ask. And then, of course, Karen, you're absolutely right on that small number of people who sort of question why you are. You can even see in their reaction, why are you asking me that? Then you can have that explanation. But we're at risk of overcomplicating something where actually I suspect the overwhelming majority of people do understand why we ask about ethnicity. And yeah, as I say, I really don't pick up problems.
Thank you, Vincent. Sam?
I think this is linked to what Vincent's just answered. Sorry, I missed the beginning, and I'm CFO for those on the call that if we did introductions. Can I just ask because if it's service users, this would be true for most mental health trusts trying to capture this information. But when we talk about our staff, then actually that is a group of people that we influence differently to another mental health trust influencing their staff. And I think it is important to distinguish that. And I think, Natalie, you said it, Vincent, you've said it, because I'm curious, because the service user perceptions could be tackled in a bigger way than just QI project for our service users. It could, I'm not saying it has to, but the staff bit, we absolutely should look at how we want to approach that within NLFT and as part of a QI project, if it should be or wider.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, and I think taking it into our BAME networks as well, and which is what Serena's started to do. I mean, I think it's staff feedback. I mean, Vincent, I hear what you're saying, but actually the feedback we were getting from staff is that they don't feel comfortable, not overwhelmingly. And Vincent, if I'm honest, I was quite surprised by that as well. But I think people did not necessarily feel comfortable in framing the question. Was the experience that we had, and whether that's our fault for not explaining why it needs to happen, but I think that's what's quite interesting about this project.
Thank you. Karen, shall I take one final point, because I'm conscious of time?
Sorry, I've always got so many questions. I just had another thought that was always in the back of my mind, which is why I was so interested in this project. My thought is, do they have too much to do, and they, you know, and they say they're not comfortable? Is the overwhelming pressures on how much needs to be done just sitting there alongside, and do they sort of, you know, blur the outlines, whatever?
Thank you, Karen. And big thank you to James for coming along to share the project. Obviously, we've still got a long way to go with this, and I'd be interested to have a conversation with you, James, as to how we can do that going forward. But thank you very much, and for everybody listening and for all your engaging questions. It's been really useful, and obviously a big topic that we really need to focus on within the organisation. Natalie, did you want to say anything final?
No, just to say thank you. And obviously this actually has created quite a lot of debate and discussion. So I think it would be good, because this is really a trust-wide QI project, and maybe think about how we pull in all the work that people are trying to do across, taking on some of the points that we've just discussed today. But thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.